Alrighty. I think I will go ahead and get us started. So, for those who are here for the first time, welcome. Just to say that all over again, but also just want to talk a little bit about how the time goes. Usually, we from the product group, in case you weren't aware, my name is Steven. I'm part of the Terraform on Azure Microsoft product group over here, and we try to share some updates, top of minds, things that we want your feedback on. And that usually doesn't take more than like half the time. And then we try to open it up to other people. If you have something that you're thinking about, if you have something that you've been wrestling with, trying to figure out, or you had a cool experiment you did, or you built something, all of those are great reasons to kind of come off mute, say, hey, I have this thing I want to show. Hey, I have this thing I want to talk about. Um, it's really an open forum for practitioners like yourselves to really get familiar with, learn more about, and also just give some feedback on all the different things that are happening in this landscape. So, all right, first things first, I do have some updates. Number one, anyone from a virtual raise of hands remember that portal export that we were trying to roll out a while ago? Nice. For all of you who have been bugging me, I'm sorry. We were trying to get that out. It is rolling out. That is not that's not 100% out in production yet, but it's in the middle of being rolled out to prod. So check your portal. You might be one of the, I think it's like 15 or 20% right now who has it, but that's going to keep rolling out. We're just making sure that we don't blow things up with that experience as we're rolling it out. We also want to make clear the whole issue with that. I've said this in previous calls. You need to register our resource provider if you're going to use that. So looks like Grady was one of the chosen ones. He was able to see it. But yes, make sure to register for the resource provider. It's Microsoft.Azure Terraform. It's a public preview, so you should be able to go ahead and use that right out of the box. No manual approvals, no weirdness required anymore. Hope you all enjoy it. Really welcome your feedback. We will make a blog post about that as soon as we're like 100% confident that it's fully rolled out. So hopefully that's exciting. Second thing, we have an MS Graph provider coming, and I think I mentioned in the previous community call. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not an MS Graph expert. I would like to say I know some things about managed identities, and I know some things about Entra, but I learned that Graph, silly me, spans a lot more than just Entra. Who here would use M365 graph endpoints if they were exposed by a raise of hands? M365. There's 1, 2, 3, 5, 4, 5. Okay, who would use an MS Graph provider in general for like Entra otherwise?
I want to manage my calendar using Terraform.
That's fair. It's interesting. We've heard some mixed things. Okay, good thing that all these people here care about the graph provider. Dominic, can you speak about, is it just for you, or are you interested in spinning stuff up for uh, like email settings, other admin settings, or is it just purely out of your own interest?
Mostly pure my own interest. Sometimes I miss meetings and I want to build an app to notify me very excessively with sound effects and Windows pop-ups and stuff. So I think Terraform could be forced into that program somehow.
Right. We were at the PowerShell Summit over at Bellevue last week, and we heard some people say they would really love that M365 set of settings. So I
Oh,
think we're in the middle of trying to figure out what that looks like. Because the thing is right, for those of you who aren't familiar, Azure AD, MS Graph, two Terraform providers. kind of like Azure M and AZ API to Terraform providers that do kind of the quote unquote same thing. Azure AD is going to be the abstraction layer. It's going to be nice and simple. It's going to be right out of the box, very easy to configure. Whereas MS Graph is going to have everything from day zero exposed in MS Graph, including V1 and beta APIs, defaults to 1.0. But with that comes a lot of power, including M365 endpoints. And that's where it gets kind of interesting, whether or not people should and shouldn't use it, want or don't want to use it.
Does that include SharePoint, the M365 graph?
Yes, SharePoint is in there.
Because something I've done for my team is we have markdown documents in a Git repo, and then using Pandoc, convert them to PDF using an Azure DevOps pipeline, and then using Logic Apps / Power Automate, taking those PDFs, which get uploaded to a storage account from the pipeline, and uploading them to SharePoint. So if we had Terraform for Graph, then we could replace some of those pipelines with managing the documents in SharePoint using Terraform.
Yes, I've heard a lot about SharePoint. That is one for sure that we've heard. So, okay. So here's where I'm at. And I want to make sure that everyone here feels okay about where I'm planning to go. My plan is I'm going to say, hey, we support everything in Graph, but we don't guarantee that we're responsible for everything in Graph. So if someone comes to me and says, hey, slash me isn't working, like, I don't know if that's something that our team will have the bandwidth to really get to. But but essentially what we can do is we can have a subset that we'll document and have actual quick start examples for, and then we'll create a reference. And then the references, I think we'll just kind of disambiguate. We'll say, note that this is not like actively maintained by the Terraform team or the Terraform product group, whereas these are. Does that feel noisy? Would you rather prefer that I almost don't expose the functionality at all, or do you all feel okay with like, okay, this is here. It's kind of use at your own discretion / risk, but it's existing and I can use it.
Instead of hard coding examples, could the existing examples be programmatically transformed to be Terraform?
Sorry. So when I say like a reference, I'm saying we're going to release like a MS Graph or Terraform documentation on MS Learn. We have plans for that. So we're going to try to programmatically have all of that. But those quick starts are going to be very wildly different in quality based off of what we can auto generate and what we can't auto generate. My question is if we have all that exposed from like, the PIM groups and Entra stuff that we all want and are all waiting for to like, hey, here's some slash me like random stuff. But then we label that as, hey, we're not actively maintaining that or going to try to like bug fix that. Does that feel like it's creating more noise, or do people prefer to have all the functions available to them?
I would hesitate to say that a completely new feature is not being actively maintained. I think there's I don't know what the phrase would be, but a better way to elaborate that it's at your own discovery rather than something that's going to be extensively documented. But for the people who are in the know on the graph stuff, that it will work in general.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I guess not actively maintained makes it sound like we don't care about the MS Graph provider. Maybe the wording to your point is just like use at your own discretion or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
We're just trying to figure that out because once you roll features out, you can't roll features back on these sorts of things. So at first, our plan was Entra only, and then we heard a bunch of people say, "Wait, if you can do M365, please." So SharePoint was one of the ones that sort of justified that. Okay, awesome. The other thing that's coming up for us is the GitHub Copilot agent. I don't know if any of you have played with GitHub Copilot agents. Can I get a show of hands of that too? Sorry, I'm making people hit their hand buttons or their raise buttons a lot today. Looks like nobody. Yeah, so if you're not familiar, GitHub Copilot has this concept of an agent where you can go and let me see if I can pull this up. You basically go into the VS Code, and there's like a little GitHub Copilot icon right next to where your search is. And if you open that, it'll say Ask Copilot, and you can like add different things. So I think this is what it would look like. And then if you from here just say, hey, at Azure, sorry, I started too early. So here's our search, and then here's the toggle chat. And then in here, there's this option to target different agents. So Azure is just one of them. And then when you hit the Azure endpoint, you actually sort of introduce yourself to different handlers the Microsoft team handles and owns. Our team is slated to be part of this. So if you go and use the Terraform handlers for Azure, then you should be able to get really high quality examples. This just is very similar to the Copilot for Azure experience. The biggest difference here is that it would actually just be within your VS Code, which I think we've heard a lot of feedback that's just more natural to folks in general.
Quick question about that. Did you say that if we use that at Azure, we're gonna once you add it to that, it'll include Terraform, or will there be a new agent like Terraform Azure?
So it's an agent. It'll include Terraform. I don't think it includes it today, but we're in the middle of
Right.
getting that set up to do it.
Right.
When that goes in GAs. The the main thing, right, is that once you do at Azure, it introduces yourself to essentially all the different handlers that all the different Azure service teams slash other teams have kind of worked on. So highly recommend that when you're doing anything Azure related, you hit that endpoint, that agent to be precise. Sweet. Okay. And my one last announcement before I hand it over to other folks is we have a great community of folks in Australia and other time zones. And these calls have been going in the mornings for Pacific time for a while now. But we do want to try to include some of the Australians and other time zones in the fun. And as a result, I think what we're planning to do is shift to having these at 9 a.m. Once every other month, and then 2 p.m. once every other month, and they kind of flip-flop between the two. And we'll just see how that goes for a bit. 2 p.m. Pacific time, obviously. So I think 2 p.m. is still like 8 a.m. for Australia, but at least you can maybe fall asleep to it if you're in the European time zones. You can set it like a podcast that you sleep to at night. Um, Please don't do that unless you really want to. That would be hilarious, though. Please let me know actually if you do. But yeah, that's just a plan to make it so that some of the other time zones can come in and join, but also that it's not crazy here. So yes, we are aware that most of the folks on this call happen to be anywhere from the US all the way over to anywhere in Europe. So really do appreciate having you all on these. And yes, please do more important things at 10 p.m. If you need to. So don't feel obligated to join. Alrighty. That about sums it up from my end. I'm going to open it up with the remaining time. What do people have for today? And what are top of mind for folks? Cue the minute of silence.
I have kind of a general question about deploying a specialized virtual machine image using the Terraform provider. It seems like it's not supported. Is that the case?
Which image and which virtual machine and which provider? I guess there's multiple questions there.
Yeah, so we have, I don't have all the details here, but we have, I'll share with you what I know. We have a situation where we got an image from a vendor for Extra Hop, and it looks like it's Linux based, and it's an appliance basically. They gave us a VHD. We were able to get it into the image gallery as a specialized image. And the way we've manually deployed it is that we basically create a disk from it, and then we create a VM from the disk. But when we try to use the Linux module for creating the VM, it requires us to specify obviously the admin username, and we can't do that. Like that kind of messes it up, and it doesn't work. So just looking like it's really the first time we've had a situation where we've tried to do something like this. So just any guidance that we can be pointed to. We ended up doing it kind of halfway through Terraform and halfway using the AZ API provider to kind of repeat the manual steps of creating the VM from the disk. But I don't know if there's a better way.
Yeah, let me open it up for anyone if they want to chime in there. And if not, then I'll just talk. Yeah, I think
Hey,
AZ API. Oh,
this
go
is
ahead.
Jeremy. Yeah, this is Jeremy. I was just going to confirm the scenario. So you're wanting to load the image that was given to you, the VHD image,
Yeah.
right, into the gallery,
Yep.
your own compute gallery.
Yep. We did that. We put it in there as a specialized image.
Yep.
Yep. And then we want to be able to create basically a VM from that, right?
Okay.
And when we do that, right, if we create it using the Linux virtual machine, that requires us to specify the admin username information basically, and when we do that, that kind of breaks it.
The admin username on the VM side.
Yeah, when we're creating it.
Okay.
Right. The username and password piece. I think that's what I was told. I could be mistaken.
Okay. Yeah, I was just trying to follow
yeah.
where you're headed.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
You do something
Like when you
similar, just
create,
not pulling up
if
a
you
repo.
create it if you go in interactively and try creating it through the portal, right, from creating a virtual machine, if you try to specify the username and password, then that kind of breaks that image. The way we've only been able to do it is by creating the VM from the disk, basically, kind of coming at it backwards. Hopefully,
Yes. Yeah, when you're given an image like that, that's how we've had to solve it as well. Build the VM off of the image, not the VM and then apply the image.
Yeah.
That's
If you're doing it in AZ API, I think you can do it in that reverse operational order as well. So I think it doesn't work for the Linux virtual machine resource in Azure M, right, Arthur?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
It's kind of the first time. I mean, usually when we create a Linux VM, it's based off of like, Red Hat or a marketplace image or something like that, right? This is kind of like a little bit of a different scenario. So,
Gotcha. I'm going to read the comment from the chat for the recording. Would it be possible to create abstraction layers in Terraform to simplify things, ergo add proper monitoring to VMs? So I don't know if I think I read VM, so I thought it was the same topic, but it might be slightly orthogonal. Are there anything else that you need from that?
Okay, my name is Torvald Petersen. I answered I gave the question. It was use to somehow, from Microsoft point of view, to some with your knowledge to simplify things in Terraform by encapsulating and doing some abstractions.
When you're saying abstractions, do you mean on a resource basis or do you mean on like a module layer? Because there are the Azure verified modules. I will put a link in the chat for you that have certain out-of-the-box solutions, but they don't necessarily have every single solution. But for example, I think for your like Kubernetes cluster virtual or Kubernetes cluster module, that one gets spun up with like a diagnostics settings and log analytics workspace and all of that.
Yeah, but okay, for pure VMs, you had to do a lot of things, set up the right data collections and set up the agents and set up the data collection tables, and there are many things to do, and sometimes you ended up by not setting it up correctly.
Yeah, so what
Because
I
there are
would
so many
recommend,
features in monitoring in Azure, and sometimes it's good to have an API which, of course, on low level provides the full functionality, and I think we should still have that. But it could also be that there are some where you think that if you look on the friction on how much work you had to do in order to set it up, you could maybe build something on top which would make it simpler for people which are not that experienced in both Terraform and Azure and monitoring.
yeah, what I would recommend, there's two ways you can go about this. Number one is you could go to the verified modules team and request them to build that module out to sort of address this scenario. That one would essentially require one of the virtual team people to sponsor the entire experience. The second thing I would recommend, and I think a lot of people here do, is you actually try to spin that all up through the portal and you just click ops your way through it. So just click, get everything configured the way you want it to. And once you have that spun up, there's actually a resource JSON view that exists today in the portal. If you copy and paste that, you can get AZ API Terraform configuration for everything. And then you can also Terraform plan and apply, and it will move all of it under Terraform's management. So you can actually do that. And then you'll just have to massage the code because it's obviously generated. But
Yeah.
that will get you pretty far along, especially for those more annoying scenarios that you just have some trouble with. I think I've personally, whenever I need to learn anything in Terraform, I start with the portal if I have no clue what the heck is going wrong. So does anyone have any other thoughts they'd add to that?
It's
Sounds like
okay.
that's what I was going to say. Policy as well could add to that. Some of the configs around monitoring we manage with policy, although we do deploy some of the policies with Terraform as well. But it's deciding what kind of balance you want, I guess.
You're saying when you deploy the policy assignments, you want that to also just be a little bit more supported out of the box, or like some better wrapping.
No, just you're talking about the gentleman there was talking about configuring monitoring for VMs, and that for me, I would naturally lean towards using policy for that because you can obviously use the tooling within the policy to report on compliance and all that sort of things, which obviously you can't. Well, you could do it to a degree in Terraform, but it's not really, the natural way to approach that.
Got it. Yeah, that makes sense. I think I see Shinkar's hand is raised.
Yeah. Hi, Stephen. I have a question. This is not related to Terraform, but it is related to Azure. We are trying to help a business unit in the Azure Service Operator. We followed the documentation prescribed by the Microsoft, but at the end it is failing. So how can I get help on that? Like, can I reach out to you later, or is there a way I can?
You can reach out to Microsoft support for that. We have Microsoft support for these sorts of cases. They should be able to help you out. I do not know every service like the back of my hand. If I did, I must have no life. So I'm not sure if, unfortunately, I think when it comes to Terraform related stuff, we usually happen to know the ins and outs. But if it's just for a specific service, I would recommend that you just ask the support team because they'll actually try to route you to the actual team that knows that service a lot better than we do.
Oh, got it. Thanks. No worries.
Yep, and in general, there's a few ways to unblock yourselves, right? Like open GitHub issues, if it's like in Terraform, Azure M, or you can try to get support through Microsoft. There's plenty of avenues to unblock in these situations. You could also just chuck it at Copilot for all I care. Like if Copilot unblocks you, then that saves you the most time, perhaps.
I tried Copilot. It is not helping at this point.
No, yeah,
I think it's
I
not
figured you
mature
already
enough.
did.
Yeah.
Sweet. Thank you. Other thoughts? Miles, I'll let you go first.
Yeah, it's just a question actually. Just whilst we were talking about policy, I'm just wondering if there's. I think it's been mentioned in previous calls, but just anything on the roadmap about, I think it's fairly common for people to deploy policies using Terraform, but it's the ongoing management of those policies. I'm just wondering if there's anything that you're aware of in the roadmap for managing that sort of thing.
When you're saying managing the policies, are you saying in a way that is more than just like assigning or a policy assignment in Azure M or something like that?
Yes. In my experience, we usually deploy policies using some of the vehicles like landing zones, stuff like that, using Terraform. But the ongoing management of those are still kind of, I hate using the term ClickOps, but it's going down that path. It's generally quite hard to manage them going forward after you've deployed them, and obviously it's very JSON focused still policies. So I'm just wondering if there's anything in the pipeline around that.
Yeah. So there's two pieces to this. We've heard two feedbacks, I guess is what I'll say. The first one is how do we make sure that Terraform is aware of policy in practice? Because those two can lack visibility into each other and kind of shoot each other in the foot, especially if you have like a modify effect or anything like that. The second thing that we're hearing, and I think I'm hearing from you right now, is how do we configure policy because it's 2025 and I don't want to use JSON anymore. That's more so what you're referencing right now, right?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
For that piece, do you happen to well, to be honest, I think the policy team is aware. We actually are like sister teams with them, not super distant sibling teams, but we are like we've talked with them about that before, and they are aware of it. I think it's one of those things that they want to get to. As for timelines, I'm not the team. I will not promise anything, but I do know that they are aware that people do not love authoring in JSON, so I'm sure that that is not slipped out of their sight.
Okay.
I think I saw that Jeffrey had something he posted in the chat. Jeffrey, did you want to talk about that, or did you just want to keep it in out of the recording?
I could talk about it. I thought it was kind of interesting when I've never really seen kind of behavior like this. Like I said, we're kind of using a niche kind of feature of Azure API Manager. We have self-hosted gateways. So for people who don't know, these are you can configure the ability for you to kind of host the gateway functionality in Kubernetes or some different hybrid models. So we've been using it for a while. Another engineer had, I think, run into this bug where there's like if you're hosting APIM internally, you have to create this configuration URL that you register the self-hosted gateway to get its configuration. And everything worked, was working fine. some other engineer, of course, now there's a third engineer involved in this, had just done a basic, Azure provider update, just, doing some maintenance on, the workspace. And I think maybe like the tags had changed, or, some very basic updates were in the plan. So they said, cool, apply. And when they applied it, it looks like even though the plan didn't indicate it was removing anything or touching the custom domain resource, the action of applying to the APIM resource actually removed that whole domain and broke the registration process and took down the self-hosted gateways. So I was just kind of interested in, like, it seems like that might be something as part of the API that the APIM team operates, but I don't know if like the API, when it's talking through and getting Azure M's getting the outputs back, how something like that would happen where like a change doesn't get shown up in a plan. It's very niche though, so I just thought it was interesting if anyone else has seen something like that.
It's niche, but I mean, if it turns into an outage, it's probably not good. So, and it seems like there are a
Yeah, I
few
mean, there's a
outputs
lot
on the
of
issue.
obviously a lot of human element in here. Someone manually creating URLs, obviously, and it looks like it was potentially a known issue anyways that just hasn't been tackled. But it was the first time I've ever encountered an issue where if you're not updating the resource, that something would be removed if you weren't like destroying the whole resource.
It, it might be, and I could be completely wrong here, that there's just a mislabeling on what's happening there. Because normally, you know how in our documentation we'll say changing this property causes something to be recreated. This might be one of
Yep.
those weird scenarios where the API actually behaves in that way, but we just somehow missed that it would behave that way when you configure it. And here it's a little wonky because it's not actually contained within the same uh, type, I guess. I'm even
Yep.
looking at the GitHub comments and it's saying like, hey, the AZ API resource wouldn't work because there's a configuration, which I'm like, then do you have to like chuck a resource action at it to set it up in AZ API? And does that resource action trigger a recreate as well or a destroy? I'm not super familiar with the whole context there. Has anyone ever run
Yeah.
into that where things just kind of blow up even though they're not even necessarily directly operated on? It's interesting. I'll put it on my team's radar, Jeffrey. I think that one's worth just at least having an answer for. Um, yeah, I don't know why that happened though, to be honest. So sorry y'all went through that, and hopefully the
Yeah.
outage wasn't too severe.
Yeah, just in dev, luckily. Update tags or whatever, and like, this thing went down. Let's go look. And luckily, I could look at what dev looked like and looked at QA and go, oh, that looks like that went away. We don't know what happened there. And they're like, oh, it's a known bug for this. So nothing terrible, but it was just kind of interesting. Figured maybe some others had seen some other similar things in other resources, but it was kind of unique. Thanks.
Yep. Hmm.
I could do a demo.
Who is that, sorry?
It's Dominic. I'm on my other computer.
Oh, got it. Okay.
And if I share my screen?
Go for it.
So I've been working on tooling for creating exports of resources. Previously, I've shown my tool which exports in what's in the portal. It has a little interactive dialog where it says what resource groups you want to export, and then it writes the input blocks and creates the resources for that. So that was the first round at this. And then I've been working on a tool for kind of exporting everything. So the first kind of flow is if I want to export like a resource group, then I have the resource group import wizard. When I enter that, it's going to say, do I want to start from scratch? And I'll say yes. And it gives a list of all the resource groups. So let's say I want my one in my cluster. and it will write the import blocks for that. So in the resource groups, here it's written the import blocks, and then there's also role assignments, which I don't have set up in this example, and then the security groups for those role assignments. So once we've written the import blocks, then we know the next step is to perform the import, so running the tf plan generate config out command. So that will create the generated file. This file, once it appears, has some cleaning up to do because of the default values provided by Terraform. Sometimes values are conflicting. So in this case, we want to get rid of the default values and get rid of the comments. So once we have this generated file, then we want to process it to create the pretty version. So this will take the loaded resources and zip them together with the import blocks. And it's supposed to also do role assignments and stuff. So that is kind of the first flow that I made. And then from the perspective of just trying to do export. So let's say you have a bunch of infrastructure that was created through ClickOps and you didn't use Terraform and now you want to manage it with Terraform. Then you need to do kind of the initial work of getting it into this format. That was the inspiration for the dump everything command. So this will try and create the Terraform for everything. So let's say just run it all. So we'll do something similar where it's going to write the import blocks for all the resources that it supports. So in this case, it actually also interfaces with Azure DevOps. So I have a test project set up there. And then I haven't settled on the best way to do this, because when you're exporting a bunch of resources, having it inside one Terraform project is more efficient. But when you are actually managing it, you're more likely to have it in a folder structure that resembles the hierarchy. So if you have a subscription and then you have the resource groups within that subscription, then you have those resources. So that ends up creating multiple directories when you're trying to do this export. So this is more what it looks like if you were to do it by hand instead of just having everything all in one. And then the results of this is very similar, where it has the import blocks zipped together with the resource blocks. And it also has Azure DevOps projects and the repos within those projects and the teams and based access management of the Azure DevOps side of things. So there's kind of the all-in-one approach, or you can mimic the hierarchy, where in this case, I have one project called test project, and it's created another directory just for the creation of the project. So there's the main file here is the import block and the actual creation of the project here. So creating this for each of your Azure DevOps projects and for each of your resource groups, and doing that export. And some of the key insights that were a part of this process is you have 20 different Terraform folders. How do you run Terraform init, Terraform and Terraform whatever 20 times in a row concurrently without everything chugging? Because the init command is not concurrency safe, but you can make it so if you use the tf init dash plugin. So if you specify the plugin directory, then that will only work offline. So you can pre-populate the provider cache so that when you run init, it doesn't download anything and it just copies files, and that makes it concurrency safe. And then that can give massive speed ups, because this dump everything command is running multiple things at once. Like if I run again here without the debug command. We'll kind of see it work. So it's writing all the blocks, and it's ensuring that the providers are actually populated. And then it will initialize all the directories using that provider cache. So doing that lets it be much more efficient for that. So this takes a little bit more time on the work account that has many, many different things solved, but the general vibe is trying to move towards a situation where we're able to export everything to be form close to the form that we would write it. So adding the cleanup stuff on that. So it's a work in progress, but I think it's interesting to see what dynamics are unlocked. If you could say, have a daily export for the entire tenant, and then does that change the way that you do changes? Are you having a single source of truth, or is Azure the source of truth, and you can have kind of distributed changes to that stuff?
So if for those who haven't been on the calls recently, this is something Dominic has shown before. This is and I think I saw in the chat that someone was asking about it. Is this still the Cloud Terrastaton tool, Dominic? Okay, I'm just linking it for everyone else. Really cool. We have our own tool that we've built as well called Azure Export for Terraform. That was a whole like portal export experience that we were talking about at the start, but we're not here to compare and say whose tool is better. Honestly, I think this is really, really sick. The fact that you're able to actually separate it out in a much more helpful manner that is really neat. Yeah.
The other or another side of this is trying to create a little bit more of a UI experience. So if I make this a little bigger, let's see if it resizes properly. So the operations that are performed, like the command line, you can do a lot with that and creating the little interactive dialogues, but it's a little harder to have the icons in there. So I'm trying to see what it would look like to have a experience for doing it with the UI stuff. So if you had a directory that says, here's my folder for some work, then just being able to drag it here and having a click and drag experience where, okay, I have a resource group or whatever. So I want to click and drag this into here and have it generate the Terraform code for you and be that kind of experience. That's also something I'm working towards. It's very hard to decide what the hierarchy should be. Like, do you have based on directories, or do you have some kind of concept of a workspace that has some well-known paths that have to be values? So it's just kind of exploring what it would look like in this view.
Very interesting. Neat stuff. Awesome. Thank you so much for that, Tony.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely check out his tool. Check out what he's doing there. I think it's cool. Before I forget, because I forgot earlier, we do have some other demos we wanted to show off. Jingwei from our team is here, so I will let Jingwei take it away as well, and she can show off some of the stuff that we're working on regarding some full screen code editing.
Okay.
Jingwei, are you here?
Oh, yes, yes. Thank you,
Awesome.
Stephen. Okay. So I will share my screen. Yeah, can everyone see my screen here?
Yep.
Yeah, sounds good. So, the demo I'm going to concentrate on is our full screen experience within the Terraform Copilot in the Azure portal. So this is our current experience here. When you log in our Azure portal, you can trigger the Copilot dialog windows here, and maybe you can ask a question about Terraform. For instance, help me configure Cosmos database using Terraform. So we will identify the keyword Terraform here, and our Copilot will navigate to the Terraform handler to retrieve the most important relevant information here, and generate this process will take like 16 seconds to generate the answers. Here we go. Now we have the HashiCorp configuration file in the code block, and this is our current user experience. You can see all the code block are crammed into this Copilot sidebar, and the visualization is not that good because you cannot grab sufficient experience from this condensed space. So to help improve that, we have made it enable us to navigate to the full screen experience editor on your left-hand side. I'm not going to play that on our live production environment because it has been temporarily exempted from the environment. So we have made a recording to show this experience here. Okay. So let's just jump into the experience itself. Yes. After you ask the questions about Terraform, now the Copilot will generate answers and provide you with a navigation button called Apply in Editor. And when you click on it, there will be a full screen editor that will be open on your left-hand side. As you can see, the content on your left-hand side is exactly the same that you will see on your right-hand side sidebar code block. And we also provide some highlight features here. For instance, the syntax highlighting, so to ease your code experience. And we can also allow you to download the content to your local environment. And you can also copy the several lines of your code here or the full line here by using the copy content and provide us some feedback regarding the portal itself, a portal for stream experience itself or the generated content of Terraform. Yeah, so basically this is our current experience, but it also have some cons here. For instance, it's not editable at the moment. It is currently read-only, which means that you can, after the generated content has been in this full stream experience editor, you might not be able to do some changes to the generated code here. So this is the case. Later on, I would appreciate that Steven will drop out a questionnaire or survey here to collect your feedback regarding this iteration 1 of our full screen experience. So really appreciate your feedback here. And we are also trying to improve this overall experience. So what we have been planning on our radar is that the first thing we want to introduce is the tree view of this full screen experience. So currently, you can see all the generated TF files are all condensed into the one single file here. So to make it more intuitive to your current Terraform experience, we will try to separate the generated TF files into different categories here, like the main.tf, provider.tf, etc. And you can click on the corresponding TF files, and the generated content will be on the right-hand side. So this is the tree view experience. And the second that we want to introduce is the draft with Copilot functions. So after you enter this editor, you can trigger this draft with Copilot Windows dialog, and you can ask it some follow-up questions with regards to your generated content. It will try to understand your context comprehensively. For instance, you can ask it to help me fix my problems in my existing files, and you can also ask some other follow-up questions. We also provide you with some simple commands here, for instance, like the dash fix or dash close down, etc. So the experience would be more easy with those commands here. Yeah, so that's what we have been planning to do. And with regards to the iteration 1 that we have actually on the way of releasing it, but I haven't released it because of some existing font issues. Would appreciate your feedback of this that, so we will make a better decision of whether we should release it or not. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, it's a nice feature. It will be definitely helpful to us. Keep us in loop when you release it. We'll enable it.
Awesome.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely let, I guess maybe from a virtual raise of hands, how many people think they would use that iteration 1 feature if it was available? A virtual raise of hands. It looks like some people in the group, so definitely think that we can talk about it more with our crew and then talk more through it.
I got a question. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, Ma. So what would be the difference between when we go to a template and there is a Terraform in there to get the exact template out, or rather than going from here?
Jingwei, did you want to answer that, or I can also answer it?
Oh, yeah, sure. Um, oh, you mean the export function generated template, the difference between the export generated templates and the content generated by Copilot? Is it a question you're asking?
Yeah, so previously in RC version has a Terraform template you can add it in there and it generates really nice code in there and everything. I was just
Mm-hmm.
curious, it's like, I mean, anything new is good for us. But I was just curious, it's like, what would be the difference?
Yeah, I see. There might be differences within your usage scenarios here. Like for when you are using Terraform, where very typical scenario is that you might not very familiar with one specific Azure resources or services, and you can ask a Copilot to help you generate it maybe from 0 to 1, so that you leverage those generated content to continue with your configuration. And the generated content is built on our Terraform handler here, which contains our like the Terraform knowledge base, the Microsoft Learn, and our several testing examples. And for the export function, maybe Stephen has go through this before. It's based on your maybe existing infrastructure, and you try to export it to the Terraform format. So
Okay,
the usage scenarios are a little bit different
yeah,
here.
From a practical perspective, I think it's really about, do you already have it spun up or do you not have it spun up?
okay,
And
yeah, yep,
Copilot is going to more accurately give you a hey, I don't know how to spin this up, versus the export will say, hey, here's this thing I've already spun up, and it will show you all the fully configured properties and how they're represented in Terraform, and then it's up to you to modify that code. The Copilot code is going to look more quality, just because it's actually has variables and all of that, implicit dependencies as well.
yeah. I missed the first part of when she was showing us like how to activate that one. So I thought like they are going as a same as a template with the Copilot. So okay, cool, got it.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you. Um, One other thing that I almost forgot about, we are in feedback season. So is our survey still open, right, Jingwei?
Yes, it's always open. Mm.
Yes, so if you are using Copilot, Terraform, Azure, whatever, um, make sure to, and I totally stole this from our uh, session. There's a QR code here. I'll have it here for the recording, but go ahead and scan that. That is a great way to give us your feedback on Terraform on Azure. Alternatively, we can also try to make sure, I don't know if Jingwei, you have the link, but we can post in the chat a link for folks to go ahead and use to give their feedback as well.
Yeah, sure. Let me post it in the chat.
Awesome.
Uh,
And we have a couple minutes left while Jingwei is doing that. Is there anything else that people had top of mind or otherwise?
Model context protocol when?
Say that one more time.
Model context protocol for Azure.
That would be great. Certainly something we've heard before. And I think it's one of those things that once all this GitHub Copilot and Azure Copilot and all of those sort of just roll out, I think that'll be the next thing we kind of stare at. Alongside another thing we're looking at is we have a lot of code that's being generated between the export tool, migration tool, all these different tools. So um, yes, I definitely think we're trying to see what else we can do with AI nowadays. And yes, Amy, I did get a new haircut.
I got one question. I mean, you guys already probably know I'm kind of new in here, jumping in there. What's the My company is like fully compliance, right? And when they are fully compliant, it's a pain. It's not a pain, but you have to document what you're doing. And when you're writing a script, what's the best way to document each resources? For example, I have a massive, right now I'm creating load balancers in Azure, if some VMs, I just created Appum, those kind of things. So what's the best way or automate way to document those all things?
I feel like someone's mentioned this before. Does anyone know of a tool that just sort of auto generates like documentation for your existing infra?
Docs?
Maybe it was
That'll
that.
do it for modules.
Probably use a tag or something on the resource to declare where the Terraform lives for that resource.
That makes sense.
Or Copilot. You just tell Copilot to write documentation. I did last week and it does a killer job at it.
Sweet.
What did you put it as a summary? Like write a document on my resources, or
Do you mean
I
from the
was
portal? You do it?
no. I was doing it in VS Code, and all I did was I was uploading a bunch of scripts and code into GitHub because I wanted to share it with the coworker, but I wanted to document so that way I didn't have to like explain it, or if he was going to use it when I was out, the documentation was there, and I just said create me a README file for this script and document it, and it did. It did a great job at it.
interesting. Thanks for sharing. I'll
Yeah.
try it. But there gotta be a way to document like more, I mean, for example, my boss, he doesn't know Terraform ABC. What the heck I'm gonna tell him is like, hey, I'm creating Appum with this appliances in there with this backend and those things in there, make sure it's compliance and those things. So, right?
I mean, I know module authors have their ways of writing documentation on here's all the stuff that's configured. You might end up having to essentially create a module documentation just for what you have deployed and kind of set it to configure it to update as you modify the infrastructure. But yeah. All right. We are 2 minutes past. So I'm going to wrap us up there today. Thank you all so much for today. Really enjoyed the conversations. Again, next month we will be meeting 5 hours later. We will be trying out a different time zone. We'll see how that goes. Hopefully all of you will be able to catch the recording who are tucking your kids into bed at that time. And we'll see you all in next month or in 2 months.
Cheers, guys.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thanks,
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you, everyone.